So today, I think it's I would say the easiest webinar because it's very easy. So this is one good point. We will see that how easy it is to install WordPress on OCI and to use the MySQL Database Service, right? So the nice car, you see it behind me too. This slide, you know it already. We have made several webinars on MDS so far. Let's start with who I am, but we're gonna go very quick because I didn't change if you were at the webinar beginning of the week. So my name is Frédéric Descamps. I am Lefred. You can follow me on Twitter if you are looking for anything MySQL related. I'm MySQL evangelist. I managed MySQL for a long time when the cloud was not yet there. I am a DevOps believer, so if you have any question related to DevOps, maybe not today during the Q&A, but on Twitter or later, I can answer you. You can find me on Slack too. We have a MySQL community Slack. As Katie says, I'm living in Belgium, and I have a blog where you can find different information of MySQL. I mean different because it's like our documentation is very, very, with a lot of content, very nice, but sometimes we need to have something a bit more practical or straightforward or a summary, and you can find that on lefred.be, and then it points to the good documentation. So what do we need if we want to deploy WordPress in MySQL? I hope everybody knows what WordPress is. So WordPress, it's a very popular blog framework to create blogs. And I use it, for example, Lefred.be, it's running on WordPress. So what do we need? We need an internet connection. Without the internet connection, it won't work. We need an OCI account, and for the moment, you can get a free trial if you go on oracle.com/MySQL, the green button, click on it, and you get a free trial. That's it. You don't need anything else. So internet, an account in OCI, and you can deploy WordPress, create your blog there in OCI. So this is the dashboard when you connect to OCI, when you have an account there. And you can do a lot of, really a lot of stuff in OCI. It's a very complete cloud. And to be honest, every day I discover something and I really like it, and it's very nice. But today we're going to focus on MySQL Database Service, of course, and you will see how easy it is to use. The first thing we need to have, it's a VCN. So VCN, it's a network, a virtual network that we will have for our servers to communicate, right? So there is, in the Oracle Cloud, you see VCN, create a VCN, or if you go over in the overview, you can click and there is a wizard, and this is how it looks like. You can say, okay, I want to create a VCN with internet connectivity. Of course, if you create a blog, you want that the world can connect to your blog and can read the content of it, right? So you need to say, okay, I want a VCN with internet connectivity. And this is how the design of our architecture will look like. So we will have the internet that will connect to our WordPress server, which is a web server. And this web server will be in a public subnet. That public subnet, you can see here, is 10.0.0.0/24. So all machines, because currently we will have only one WordPress, but it's possible to have several machines there that are accessible from the internet. It's very important to never add a database, any type of database, but also MySQL, in the public subnet. It's not nice to give access to the internet to your data like that. And this is, you know, there is a lot of breach from in other clouds and other database vendors. And one of the reasons was because they also give access to the internet to their database server. So here you can see the database server is in a private subnet. meaning that from the internet, you won't be able to connect to it. And then we have the VCN that takes part of it, and it has the two subnets inside of it. So 10.0.0/16 is our VCN, so big range. And inside of it, we have a public subnet 10.0.0.24 and 10.0.1.0.24 for all machine we're going to add in this private subnet. There is no choice when you use MDS to put that server somewhere else than in a private subnet. So even if you would like to put it in public subnet, it's a bad idea. We told you every time it's a bad idea. So, but he said, no, I really want to. It's impossible to do. You are not allowed to put the MDS instance in the public subnet. So that was for the architecture. So as you see, it's quite simple. Two machines, one compute machine, the WordPress, and the service, which is MDS, that it's not only a machine, it can be several machines and stuff like that. You don't know what's there. It's just, but you have a connection in the private subnet to your database. So let's continue here. So we create this VCN with internet connectivity. We need to give a name. So I'm not very original for that. So I gave the name Lefret VCN. You need to give a compartment. I'm using, I have a sandbox compartment where I can put all my systems. So it's sandbox Lefret, I will put it there. Then you can see that it's already there, all the IP and the range. And this is what I want to use. So for the VCN, I will use 10.0.0/16. And for the public one, 10.0.0/24. And for the private subnet, 10.0.1.0/24. So this is nothing complicated here. Just follow the wizard on the OCI dashboard. So this is how it looks like. After that, you can see you have on your VCN, you have the name of your VCN, you have the CDR block, and you have the two subnets. So this is the overview, the detail of it. So we have VCN. That was one of the things we need to be able to add some machines there or some service to connect to them and to interact with them. They need to be in a VCN. So this is done. After that, we need to create our MDS instance. So MDS will be our database, our MySQL database. So it's very easy again. From the OCI dashboard, you go in MySQL, DB systems, you click there, and then you reach one page where you will see a list of all your systems if you have many, or none if you haven't created any currently. And then you say, I want to create a DB system. Once again, the nice OCI dashboard will help you to find your way in everything you need to set up with a very easy wizard, right? And it's only 3 screens that we're gonna change and update. So the first one looks like we need to give a name. So here I will call it MySQL. You give some description. So if you have many servers, it's nice to know where and what they are doing. Then you can choose an availability domain. So in my case here, you can see I am in US, right? And I have 3 availability domains, 81, 82, and 83. And I have also fault domains. So fault domain, this is very specific to OCI, meaning that in the same availability domain, you have also different fault domains, that if a full domain has an issue, another one it still can be still available. You can see it like it will be like in the same data center, different floor, different buildings, stuff like that on the same campus to make it very more safe with very low latency. So it's very nice. Then you select also a configuration. So you can change the configuration to choose another one. And if you followed the webinar from Mark Leith, he explained you how to create your configuration. But it's possible to create in advance and many configuration where you put some, it could be the configuration of the system itself. So how big it has to be, how many cores and stuff like that. But also you can change for example, some max connections and stuff like that. You can do that in the configuration, and then you need to apply a configuration to the instance you created. Here we use the default configuration, which for a block 50 gigabyte of data, it's enough to start with. So we leave it and we don't change anything. And finally, we need also to add a user, because you won't have the root user in MDS, because this is, let's say, unsecure to provide that to all users. You could do something wrong, and then it's a service, right? It's not that you get an instance where you can do whatever you want. I mean, you can do whatever you want data related, but the system, it's not managed by you. This is the goal, to use a service, right? So the service will be managed by the MySQL team. And if you are using, we're going to see later, replication or whatever, it's all managed. You just set up, but then you can relax. You don't need to manage that. But you also need to connect to it, right? So you need to create a user. So in my case, I will create the user. I will call it admin, and I will give it a password, right? You need to confirm the password, of course. And by default, you will see it goes on the private subnet I've created. You cannot choose other than private subnets. You may have multiple private subnets, so you can choose there which one you want, but you won't be able to connect to any public subnet. Like I said earlier, it would have been a very bad idea that we don't allow you to do that. Then you can also specify the MySQL port and the X protocol port. MySQL port is for classic, is the classic MySQL protocol. So the one that everybody uses in 3306. The X protocol, it's for to do CRUD operation, to also do document store stuff. Unfortunately, WordPress so far is not using it, but it's possible to use that if you want to write your own application with the Xdev API, which is very nice and easy to learn and to do. Maybe some webinars in the future related to that too. And finally, you can enable, and by default it's enabled, you can enable automatic backups. So by default, it's we keep 7 days, but you can change that value. And you can also specify a backup window. When do you want them to be done? So that's it. And nothing else. You do that and your database will be created and provisioned for you. And then you will have access to it. So here we can see, so if we check the MDS instance details, we can see which version you are using. So we are using 8.0.21, the latest one available right now. And it has an IP address, so the system, and you can see that the IP address, it belongs to this private subnet 10.0.1, and this one, it's .9. It will start, if it's your first one, it will be 1, then .2, but I've created a lot in my sandbox, so I got 10.0.1.9. You can see that it belongs to the full domain number 1, right? And it's in the second availability domain, this one. So for MySQL, that's almost it. The database is running, everything it's done, backup will be taken. So now we need to focus on WordPress, and which is fun because we are in a MySQL Database Service webinar, is that the most of the work will be done now in this WordPress compute instance. This is the, I would say, the most complicated, even if it's not that complicated. Right? So our WordPress will be installed in this compute instance that will belongs to the public subnet. So we go and compute instances and we create this instance. Once again, we need to have a name. We can select what kind of image we want. You have multiple possibilities. And here I'm using the default one, which is Oracle Linux 7.8, but you can change that. And there is also Oracle Linux 8.2 or whatever you want. Then you need to also choose an availability domain to put it, and the shape of it. So which kind of hardware resources, more resources that you want to have. So if I use VM standard 2.1, you can see here I have one core with 16 gigabytes of memory and 1 gigabyte of network. Perfect to do my blog. And I create it. Then you need to also see where you will want to use it, in which subnet. And this one, where my server, web server will be located, needs to be in the public subnet. If you put it in a private subnet, you won't be able to connect to it from the internet. So we need to put it in the public subnet, and as soon a machine is in public subnet, you have the possibility to assign it a public IP. So here we assign a public IP address to this compute instance. So assign public IP address, it's a radio button, you click on it and you get it. Something also very important is that you don't need to forget to be able to connect to that machine by adding your SSH key. So you need to add your SSH key, the public one. You can paste it, you can select the file from your disk, and when you have done that, you can start creating. You need the SSH key to be able to connect using the user OPC. So then you create it, it will be provisioning, then when it's done, it's running, and you will see it got a public IP. So this is what we were looking for, and this is what you will add in your domain, in your DNS, if you want to access it from the internet with the name. And you can see it has also a private IP address. It's interesting now later for the credentials, for example, and we can see where it stays, in which full domain, which availability domain, and so on. So now that we have created, that we see it's green, meaning that it's running, we will check we will be able to connect to it. So how do we connect to it? We use SSH. So in my case, I'm a Linux user. If you are using Windows, there is Git Bash or there is PuTTY, many ways to connect to it. So, but on Unixes, I will use SSH and I will provide the key. I have pasted earlier, right? I pasted the public key, and now I will use as identifier my private key. The user, by default, it's OPC. So I use OPC, add, and the public IP I received. Then the first time we will say, do you want to have the keys to exchange that? You say yes. And you can see now we are connected to the WordPress machine. Of course, this machine is not acting as a WordPress yet. It's just a simple Linux that has been installed and it's reachable by a public IP. So the next step is to install WordPress. So we're going to install WordPress. So to install WordPress, if you don't know WordPress, it's a PHP application. So we need to use PHP. Depending on which version of Linux you are using, maybe you don't have the latest PHP. And maybe you have heard that in MySQL 8, we changed the authentication plugins to something much more secure. And since PHP 7.4, we are sure that all the authentication plugins for all the connectors of PHP you want to use are supporting this authentication plugin. So it's like if it is MySQL ND, PDO, or in 5.7 are supporting our new authentication plugin, which is auth plugin caching SHA2 password. This is the name of it. So we need to install PHP 7.4, which is not the default in Oracle Linux 7, neither in CentOS or all the 7 versions. So we're going to install, first we install EPOL, we install the REMI release for 7, and then we need to enable that repo, and we install PHP with some modules that are required for WordPress, like PHP GD, PHP JSON, MySQL driver, so MySQL ND, PHP zip, mcrypt, mstring. So we do that. These are some PHP modules that are required. If you don't do that, when you will install WordPress, it will tell you, hey guys, I'm missing PHP XML, I'm missing PHP GD, and then you need to always reinstall them and restart the wizard and refresh the wizard. So as we want to go straight to the point, let's install what we need. So we do that on this compute instance, the WordPress compute instance, and it's installed. When it's installed, if you really want to verify that this new authentication plugin is supported, because MDS use MySQL 8 and MDS use, of course, the more secure authentication plugin. So if you don't know, MDS is MySQL 8 Enterprise Edition. So with all the enterprise features that are available, it's part of MDS. So if we want to verify which if the authentication plugin caching SSH2 password is supported, we can run this command. So it's PHP -i. We just do a grep on the loaded plugins and the PHP version to see which version it is. And we can see that all loaded plugins are there, and we can see that the one we are looking for, we are there. If you try to install PHP, WordPress with PHP, but on an old version of PHP, you won't be able to connect WordPress to MySQL 8. Of course, there is a way to tell MySQL to not use this secure authentication plugin and use an old one, which is less secure. It's possible, but in MDS, we need to use the secure one, right? So, and if you are looking for how to do that for you, go to lefred.be. I have a lot of articles explaining that. So now we need to install WordPress, right? So we will download WordPress and let's install the latest one. So I will go in var, when we install the PHP, we also install Apache on Oracle Linux. So we have var www created, it's there. And now we will do download from the internet the latest WordPress version. So the WordPress version is downloaded. Then we just need to unpack it, rename it, because let's remove the HTML, the default webroot, which is empty. So we're gonna delete it and we're gonna replace it by the WordPress that we just created. So why do I do that? It's to not modify the Apache configuration to point it to WordPress. It's configured to point to HTML, let it call HTML. Then we need to change the ownership for the Apache, which is the user that will run the web server, which is called HTTPD in Oracle Linux. So we do that, we are good, and we can start Apache now. So this is how we do. We use systemd, so we do systemctl start HTTPD. And then if anything happens, we want that HTTPD always, so if we restart the instance, we want that HTTPD restarts too. We just do enable HTTPD. So this part is nothing related to MySQL. It's just for WordPress on the compute instance. And it's just to install PHP and WordPress. But then we have something extra to do, which is, like I said earlier, maybe the more tricky, I won't say tricky because it's not that complicated when you know it, but it's where a lot of people, if they don't know, can have some issues. And this part is security. It's very important for us that security itself, it's very important for in OCI, for Oracle and for the MySQL team. But, and this is why we don't want to stop firewalls. We don't want to stop SE Linux on production machines. So here I will show you how to keep that and to configure that to allow your WordPress to be reachable and to connect to the database without any issue. So like I said, the security is one of the major concerns for us, and we will need to deal a bit more with security than any other cloud providers. So in the WordPress compute instance, the one where we just install PHP and Apache and WordPress, we will need to allow connection to the port 80, because this is the default HTTP port, and maybe 443 if you want to use HTTPS, right? Then we need to allow Apache to connect to the database, because by default on Oracle Linux, you are, but on all, let's say, I would say all Linux from that 7, like Red Hat, CentOS, all the enterprise version here are not allowed to connect. The Apache process is not allowed to connect to a remote database by default. So we need to tell it, hey, you can connect to a remote database, and the remote database is for us the MDS instance, right? So we do that, and then we also need Apache to write to WordPress folder, because most of all the new, I would say, CMS, right? They add modules, they install modules, they change configuration. So all this process needs to write data. It's not like a static HTML that it's there. You need to be able to write the data, to change configuration from the process itself. So we need to allow Apache to do that. Then in the OCI dashboard, we also need to allow the connection from the internet to the public subnet on HTTP and HTTPS. So you have a firewall on OCI. This is the main one where you have rules and you need to deal with that. But you have also a firewall on the instance, on the compute instance. And we need to deal with both of them. We won't stop them. We will just configure both of them. More security, it's good. And of course, we need to allow the machine that is in the public subnet to connect the private subnet for all MySQL connections it needs to do. So let's start with the compute instance firewall, right? So on the WordPress machine, so we use the firewall command, and we said for the zone public, it has to be permanent. So we need to keep that rule. We need to add the port 80. If you want to use 443 for HTTPS, you need to do exactly the same. But here we won't deal with certificates today to make it simple and short, but it's exactly the same way. Then you just need to reload the firewall. So here it's done. For the firewall and the compute instance, it's okay. Then SELinux. So SELinux, we need to say, okay, HTTPD can write data there. And we can also, from HTTPD, connect to a remote database on the network. So these are the two commands that we need to do, right? So this was for the compute instance. Like I said, it's not that complicated, but you need to know it. So here we have a slide that summarizes all the steps you need to do. And then finally, on OCI, we need to we go on the public subnet. And we need here to, in the security list, you can create one or you can modify the default one. Here, we're going to use only WordPress and MDS on architecture. So I will just change it, the default one, and add some rules. And the rules, I will say, okay, the world, the internet. So it's 0.0.0.0/0. It's allowed in TCP to connect to the port 80 and 443 to say HTTP and HTTPS. So then a small description and you add the rule. Right. After that, you say, okay, I want to that all the machines in the public subnet 10.0.0.0/24 can connect to the port 3306. Are already at 33060, even if WordPress is not using it. But if you want from a shell or something like that, connect to in using the Xdev API and the X protocol, you will be allowed to do that. So I will use for standard and X protocol. So this is done. And then on the private subnet here, I will add a security list, because if you never did, you need to do it. And you can see here, use the default one, the one we just created. So we are done for the security. So we need to add, so to summarize, you need to set up security on the compute instance, Firewall SC Linux, and then you need to add Firewall or rule security on OCI. So now we are almost ready to install WordPress and to go through the installation of WordPress to configure everything. So what we need to do, we need to have to create a database in our MDS, and we need to create a user, a dedicated user for WordPress. It's, of course, we create a user admin earlier, but it's always nice to have a dedicated user for every product you have, or even for users or service, whatever. It's dedicated user, it's more secure. So if there is an issue, you can find what's going on much easier than everybody using the same password, account and password. So to create a dedicated database and a user for WordPress, we need to install a client, a MySQL client on the compute instance, because it's the only one we have access from the internet using SSH, right? So we will use the MySQL Shell. So now on the WordPress machine, we're going to install MySQL Shell. So this is where you can find where, if you go in devmysql.com, you will see the product, there is the shell, and you can download it for all the version you have. And you have a link, and this is what I do here. I install it on this compute instance. I use RPM to install it. You can also install the MySQL repo if you want, and then just do install MySQL Shell. So now we have the shell. We use MySQL SH. I want to do SQL, and by default, MySQL Shell uses JavaScript. For what I need to do, create a database and create a user, I need to do it in SQL. And remember earlier when we create this MDS instance, there was this IP, which is 10.01.9, and we're gonna use it now, right? So this was the IP we found here. So this is what we use to connect, and 3306, meaning the standard protocol. Then we are connected to it. We create a database. My database, I will call it WordPress. We create a user. So my user, it's called WP, and it has a password. And then I will grant all the privileges for that user to that database. So he will be able to create tables, procedure, whatever he needs. When it's done, on my browser, I will use the public IP of the WordPress machine, and I will reach out the installation wizard of WordPress. Select the language. Then the next step, it tells you, okay, be sure you have everything you need, like the database name, user name, password, host, and all that kind of stuff. And then when you have everything, you say, let's go. So here, database host name is WordPress. We just created it. The username, WP. The password, the one we just created now. Then the database host, which was 10.01.9, and table prefix, you can leave it the default, and you do that. If you have done all the steps right, it will tell you, okay, all good, I was able to connect, we can run the installation. And you just follow the installation of WordPress, which put the title in on the website you are creating. You have to have a user to connect, but this is not a user to connect to the database. This is a user to connect to WordPress with the password, an email, and so on. When you finished, it says, okay, you can go and log in. And here we are. You can log in on WordPress, and you have the dashboard of the WordPress. You can now do the theme, whatever you want. And you can see it's just connecting directly to MDS without any single issue. Very easy, it's very fast, and this is how it looks like when the first page you have, right? So now it's time to relax. The WordPress is installed. The DBA has done its job. So now it's the web developer to modify everything on the WordPress to whatever they need. But database-wise, no, it's in the hands of the MySQL team. So you have nothing to worry anymore. Just focus on your blog and or on your website to make it like you want. But what's next, right? So this is cool. The objective of today is there, but can we go further on that? Yes, we can also automate all these steps I've done, right? So everything I did now, oh, sorry, I did now. We can automate all that with Terraform. So when you use Terraform, you can do it locally on your system using Terraform. And I will show you how to use Terraform and deploy some stuff during the Oracle Developer Live. There will be an hands-on lab, so I encourage you to join and to register for it. If you want to see how to do that from your machine with Terraform and deploy in OCI services, and we're gonna deploy MySQL DB cluster during that session, that's hands-on labs. But for now, what we can do also, it's just go in the resource manager. We can have stacks, and there we can create a stack, and you just put a zip file, and you can deploy WordPress. I haven't done it yet for WordPress itself, so it's soon. If you are really interested on that, just stay tuned on the Planet MySQL or Twitter or my blog or whatever, and I will publish the source and the example of how to deploy everything we did now just using this stack, just pushing there, and then you say run the stack, and it will install the MDS instance, it will create the VCN, it will do everything for you. It's just you have to put a machine there and put some settings, and that's it. I am working on that right now, so it's not yet ready, but it's very, very easy to do. But if you want more with WordPress and MDS, what can you do? So you can also use some architecture like this one. So here you can see that we have the internet, and we have an OCI load balancer, because this is available, this public load balancer in OCI. And you can have multiple WordPress if you need to share the load on different machines. And these machines can be on different availability domains or fault domains. And they can also connect. For example, in this case, you can, if you follow the red flow, you will see that all the rights goes to MySQL one instance that is in the fault domain 2 in OCI. It's an MDS instance, and you can see that all the reads can go on MySQL 1, MySQL 2, or MySQL 3. These ones are replica, and they are connected by a channel replication that you can set up between instances. Channel is not yet GA, so currently is limited availability because we are still finishing to test it. So if you really want to do that and to try it, you need to ask to your sales rep, for example, but it will be in GA soon, I guess. But don't ask me the dates, I won't be able to give you any. And it's possible to do this stuff. So this architecture that you can see here, use HyperDB for WordPress to split the reads and the writes. So it's just a module you need to install and configure. It uses MySQL router, and then it uses, so every WordPress has, if you can see here, it's a bit small on the, I don't know if you see them here, but they all have here a small router, right? And they connect locally. So all WordPress connect locally, and the router sends reads and writes using HyperDB and the router to connect to the right instance, right? And it used this MDS replication channel that I just told you about. I also show how to work with the replication channel on my previous webinar that will be also online. You can follow and you will receive the newsletter from the marketing team to get that if you're interested how to set up the MDS replication channel. And that's about this. So if you want to try MDS, please, you can get $300 credit now, which is for only database. It's a lot. You can do quite a lot of stuff. No worries.